Hello, I'm Elizabeth de Brito. My pronouns are she and her. I am the founder and producer of The Daffodil Perspective, an online classical music radio show creating a space for everyone to belong. The Daffodil Perspective has been going for over 2 years now. It is gender balanced, racially equitable and inclusive, with every single show featuring at least 50% female composers, half of whom are women of colour, as well as 25% male composers of colour. I strive to make every episode as diverse as possible with a range of nationalities, instrumentations, eras, skin colours, genders, everything as well. I am thrilled today to be speaking as part of the Pride Bands Alliance series MVPX. Today I'm going to be talking about gender equality in classical music. Actually, I'm personally very excited to talk to you because I am a band geek myself. Granted, the band camps I went on in Britain weren't quite the same as the ones that American Pie portrays, but a huge amount of fun nonetheless. I am a clarinet player, and as we know, clarinet parts, pretty much most wind parts in orchestras stink. That's why we love wind bands, am I right? Much more fun for wind players, way better parts. Now, I adore concert band music, and I play quite a bit on the show, as much as I can anyway, and a lot of general wind music. Now, growing up, I played in several wind bands through school, as well as being part of the National Children's Wind Orchestra and National Youth Wind Ensemble of Great Britain. Then, as an adult, playing in the local county band all through my 20s before moving to London. So, we're talking a sum total of 20 years in concert bands, but not once did I play any music written by a woman. This is not a unique experience. This is very common for musicians all over the world, mostly only learning music by men, and white men at that. A frequent chauvinistic argument is that only quality music survived. Only the best music is played and kept. Well, firstly, this screams of misogynistic ignorance. I mean, our society is built upon the supposed superiority of men. And this is not just in classical music. Men and their contributions are disproportionately valued, while women's contributions are hidden, ignored, and marginalised. Secondly, why would only men write classical music? It's ridiculous to think that no women ever wrote classical music. Because it is. Women have been writing classical music since the very beginning. You have Cassia from the Byzantine Empire in the 9th century, Hildegard von Bingen in the 12th century, is two of the earliest brilliant women writing music. And as we know it, 4 centuries of a distinct industry, a distinct genre and history, and no mention of a woman. Now, I went to an all-girls school, and halfway through our school, decided to have houses instead of homes when I was about 15. And all the houses were named after brilliant women. The names chosen were Jane Austen, Charlotte Bronte, Marie Curie, Barbara Hepworth, Rosalind Franklin, Amy Johnson, Rose Parks, and Mary Seacole. Now, these women were great trailblazers in their respective fields. Novelists, scientists, aviators, sculptors, social activists, nurse. All women fighting for their rights, fighting with respect, but not in music. Now, our school had a thriving music department, of which I was a part, and yet no female composers were even mentioned or put forward for the new houses. It doesn't make sense. And actually, Barbara Strozzi was the most prolific composer of secular cantatas in the 17th century. Mariana Martinez was a composer and pianist who ran the most influential salon in 18th century Vienna, as well as writing a ton of brilliant music. Louise Farrenc was the first long-term female professor of music at the Paris Conservatoire. She fought and won equal pay for herself in the 19th century. Dame Ethel Smythe from Britain was knighted for her services to music. Florence Price was the first black woman to have a symphony premiered by a major orchestra in 1933. Chiquinha Gonzaga formed the first organisation for protecting music copyright. That was in Brazil at the turn of the century. So there are many, many inspiring female composers, but not even an all-girls school supposed to value women and promote them doesn't think there are any. Now, my experience growing up was that it was never to be questioned. The classical canon was set in stone. The music of Bach, Beethoven, Brahms, etc. was the only music worth listening to and playing. These handful of white men were all there was, all that was worthy. And I think this is kind of true for many of us. We grow up studying all these white men and conditioned never to question it. Now, as we make change in classical music and work towards creating gender equality, so much of this change needs to be in musical education, in the classrooms with children and teenagers, so they grow up knowing Clara Schumann as much as Johann Brahms, knowing Elizabeth McConkie as much as Benjamin Britten. Now, it'll take way too long for me to go through the hundreds, thousands of female composers there are, but one thing that kind of constantly comes up is that they were all involved in the same music scenes as the famous great composers. Actually, this week I've just decided we should call them the great white male composers instead, because that's what they are. That's for another time. Anyway, all these women, they were all around the same scenes as these men that we all know. Many of them were friends, colleagues, wives, relations of the great white male composers. And that's one thing that's constantly come up for me in my research, is how much progress women made in their time. You know, how many things they did, how many accomplishments, so many firsts, so many trials blazed. Then after their death, their legacy was completely washed away. It's sort of this inexorable tide of patriarchy. And as we work on creating gender equality, we must think about legacies. Instead of creating sandcastles, we need to create cathedrals, ensuring lasting change in our industry, keeping these legacies alive. So 30 years later, the next generation aren't in their 30s like me, still having this conversation and discovering Margaret Barnes for the first time, wondering if there are any female composers, any black composers. Our whole mentality, our education must be a holistic approach, so music by women continues to last. Because there have been so many people working on this before us, so many organisations working for gender equality. The Society of British Women Musicians, formed in 1911 to promote women musicians and composers. The Society of American Women Composers, formed in 1925. Archive Frauen Music, formed in the 70s. The fight for gender equality in music is nothing new, so what can we do to ensure permanent change? Actually, the word that annoys me the most, and the one way we can do to ensure permanent change, is stop using the word highlight. Organisations are always talking and thinking about highlighting women on International Women's Day, Black composers during Black History Month, and LGBTQIA+ composers during Pride. I see it all the time, and this is a huge problem. Let's highlight marginalised composers on one day, and for the other 364, we'll go back to playing just white men and pretending they don't exist. Highlighting is not equality. Highlighting is not inclusion. Highlighting is othering. One concert of women a year is not equality. Women composers are not a genre. The word highlighting is one of the biggest barriers towards lasting change. We have to get away from this mentality of once a month we have our Negro Day type segregation and commit to gender equality and inclusion. We need our change to last. And this means including women on every concert, every radio show, every recording, all the content we create all year round. And not just women, but non-binary, trans, and gender diverse identities as well. So we need fundamental shifts in our practice. We've had decades, centuries of being indoctrinated with this narrow ideal. There is so much bias, both conscious and unconscious. It's a big mess, and it takes a lot of work to overcome. But can it be overcome? Yes, I know, because I've done it. 3 years ago, I knew no female composers, no male composers of colour, apart from Scott Joplin, of course. If someone asked me 3 years ago to name some great American composers, I would have said Gershwin, Copland, Bernstein, right? Now, first composer would definitely be Florence Price, Aaron Copland, Amy Beach, Adolphus Hellstalk, Valerie Coleman, and George Gershwin. How did this happen? Complete immersion in music by women. Thousands of hours of research. It's not easy. It does take a lot. It takes a lot of research, reading, getting to grips with all these amazing women and their remarkable stories, the lives they led, the opportunities, the struggles, and then looking at it from a more open mind, understanding the context of their history, the context of the times. Now, all this is not easy to do when the classical music industry is so rigid. So how can we break through? Well, like I say, this is what we need. We need to listen to music by music constantly, perform it in every program, every concert. And at the moment, what we have is sending the message that music by men is normal and music by women is abnormal. And we need to change that to show ourselves and audiences that music by women is normal, not an other. So another frequent argument that I frequently hear against increased diversity is, but we can't cancel Beethoven. No one is ever suggesting that. More music by women doesn't mean no Beethoven at all. I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, I personally can quite happily never listen to Beethoven or Mozart again, but that's just me. And for me, and this argument, and I use the term loosely, it's like a petulant child throwing a tantrum about sharing a chocolate cake. They have the entire chocolate cake, and anything less is unacceptable. They can't share anything at all. It's ridiculous. There's so much space. So the average orchestral season contains 10% Beethoven and 10% Mozart. It's ludicrous. So plenty of space to continue having some Beethoven, some Mozart, and more music by women. I mean, halving the amount of Beethoven and Mozart already gives you a season with 10% music by women. And let's be honest, people are never going to stop listening to Beethoven. They're never going to stop liking him. Just hopefully they'll like Emily Mayer and Helen Hagen too. And another facet to the but we can't cancel Beethoven is, but audiences want to hear this. People don't want to hear music by women. Easy to answer to this one. Pair some familiar music with some unfamiliar stuff. Best of both worlds. Get them in with Beethoven's 7th and send them out obsessed with Emily Mayer's Piano Concerto. And in Wind world, get them in with Philip Spark and Vincent Pichetti and send them out obsessed with Chen Yi or Cindy McTee. And just speaking of my experience, I was completely sick of hearing the same few white men over and over and over again. That's one of the reasons that I left the classical music industry as a teenager. Now, audiences are dwindling for mainstream classical music, so I can't be the only one sick to the back teeth of the canon. But that raises the question, how do we reinvent the canon? What should we be leaving off? What should we be changing? What should be added? Well, as mentioned before, it's not about subtracting anything. It's about adding. For me, though, one of the great things about doing the show and discovering all this wonderful music by women was that realising that a lot of the music I had grown up with, I didn't really care for. Mozart, Beethoven, Chopin, the Lesser Schumann, not a fan of. And that's okay. That's my personal subjective taste. And whilst I didn't like a lot of it, I found some of it holds up for me. I still like Whole Second Suite for military bands. I still like The Hebrides by Felix Mendelssohn. And I still like everything Philip Spark wrote. And this wasn't forced on me. I discovered all this wonderful music like Chinese by Yin and Circuits by Cindy McTee and Grace Williams' Trumpet Concerto. And some of the old stuff I still liked, and it means more to me now because it's my decision. And this is what creating gender equality in classical music is partly about. Giving us and our audiences a choice, giving them the whole spectrum so they can hear and decide for themselves what they like. Now, this is where a lot of wind bands are well placed for this. Speaking just in the UK, adult community bands often have a ready-made audience. So many of the people coming to see their concerts go because they know the band members and want to support them. They just go to see their friends, partners, families play. My old Hertfordshire concert band audience was mostly acquaintances of band members. Likewise, school bands, the majority of audiences for school bands are gonna be the band members' parents, families, friends, boyfriends, etc. These audiences will be there for you because they're coming to see the musicians. And so this is the perfect opportunity to get them in with some brilliant music. Because if they're like, oh, we're just gonna hear the same Beethoven and Mozart, and then suddenly, you're throwing Julie Giroud or Lauren Bonovsky at them, they'll be thrilled. It'll be really exciting and new. So another argument is, but there just isn't enough music by women. I've been doing a 90-minute radio show with 50% women for 2 years, playing well over 300 female composers, and I've most certainly not run out of music. In fact, one of the most common things you'll hear on my show is, I've been meaning to play this for ages. Seriously, I need to have Daffodil Perspective bingo. I say it all the time. But seriously, I have got queues and queues of awesome music. And it's on the radio, so it's all been recorded, so it's all been published, and it's all available. Trust me, there's more than enough. And I don't think I'll ever get through it all in my lifetime. And the other side of this, there isn't music by women, is, but women didn't write music back then. Okay, so while it's true that there were definitely fewer women composers in the past due to discouragement, flat out forbidding them to play, forbidding them to join institutions, lots of other reasons, there's 400 years of music by women plus. And every generation there were more. It is true, though, that there are many more contemporary women composers. This is another area where wind bands are well placed because it's mostly music within the past 70 years anyway. Most of the specifically wind band composed music is since 1950. And as we all know, wind bands love new music. I still love that classic article by John Mackey about bands versus orchestras. So hilarious and so true. If you haven't heard of it, you should definitely read it. So I have talked more about the general classical music canon, but what about wind bands, concert bands specifically? As the white male canon goes, we've got Frank Ticelli, Vincent Pichetti, Johann de May. In the UK, we've got Philip Spark, Nigel Hess, and of course the endless playing of whole suites for military band. So now I will mention a few essential living composers that you guys have to check out. Firstly, Cindy McTee, white American composer, written a ton of brilliant music, including Finish Line, Ballet for Band, Timepiece. The North Texas Wind Symphony actually did a composer's collection portrait album of some of her wind band music, which is totally fantastic. Then we have Julie Giroud, also a white American composer, completely essential wind band composer. Her piece, One Life Beautiful, is just exquisitely moving, and it's great for showcasing the quieter sounds of wind bands. I always like to say, wind players, we can play quietly. We don't like to, but we can. Joking, sort of. But seriously, One Life Beautiful, check it out. Julie Giroud's written hundreds of pieces for wind band, several albums recorded, so lots to get into there. Now, from China, we have the great Chen Yi, one of my favourite composers of all time. She's been based in the US for decades now, actually. Her piece, Spring Festival, in particular, is awesome. And it's on the easier side. It's a kind of classic starter piece, like 3 minutes long, while her Dragon Rhyme is longer and more challenging. And I can't pass this opportunity to shout out her piece, Bar Yin. Originally for sax quartet and string orchestra, she rearranged it for sax quartet and wind ensemble, because, you know, wind ensemble, which is better. Again, I'm just biased. As a clarinet player and band geek, I'm super biased. Anyway, that was recorded in 2019 by Prism Quartet and the Missouri Conservatory Wind Symphony. It's just a masterwork. So that's worth checking out as well. But like I say, it is on the more difficult side. Across the pond, we have French composer Ida Gakowski. Her Concerto for Wind Orchestra, or Concerto pour Grande Orchestra de Harmonie, is just amazing. So that is just a few brief notes, but there's a ton of brilliant music by women for wind band. Now, to properly go down the rabbit hole, thoroughly recommend the Wind Repertory Project. That's windrep.org. Brilliant database for wind band music. It's sort of structured like Wikipedia. They've got composer section organised. They've got a female composer section with hundreds of composers on there. And each piece on the project, they have difficulty levels and instrumentation and all the stuff you need to know as, you know, as band directors and conductors to program it. So then we have andwewereheard.org, a great database of diverse composers of wind band music. It's this massive Google spreadsheet, it's huge. 3 tabs, one for women composers, one for composers of colour, and one for LGBTQIA plus composers. Like I say, it's this brilliant Google spreadsheet, it's huge. And lastly, we have EuropeanFemaleWindBandComposers.com, which does exactly what it says on the tin. It lists many European women who write for wind band. It has their bios, their pictures, plus the specific wind band pieces they wrote, which is really cool. So those 3 resources alone will see you through a serious rabbit hole of original wind band music. But as we wind bands know, never underestimate a good arrangement. Good transcriptions are around, and it's always fun to have a few up your sleeve. So do check out my show, because I play 50% women. But yeah, for an almost complete list of every female composer ever, Donna's The Big List, or Wikipedia's list of female composers, has over 6,000 names on there. A lot of this music has been arranged for band. Sheet Music Plus has several. I just found Florence Price's Adoration arranged for wind band. Like I say, Florence Price, first black female composer to have a symphony premiered by a major orchestra in 1933, when the Chicago Symphony Orchestra premiered music. She is my favourite classical composer of all time. Her music is absolutely incredible, and she's enjoying a lot of interest in the last year or so. Do check her out, particularly Adoration, arranged for wind ensemble. Plus, we have Chemin Taillefer, phenomenal 20th century French composer, member of Les Six along with Poulenc and Millau. Found a couple of good wind band arrangements of her music as well on Sheet Music Plus, so it's worth a look. So I think that about sums it up. That's a pretty positive note to end on. Lots of music for you guys to check out. I hope I've given you a lot to think about and a lot of music to check out and enjoy. So there's so much brilliant concert music out there, and this is the time to take action, particularly during COVID, when so much content is given away for free. People are thrilled to have music out to engage with, so it's a great time to start exploring some of this repertoire. Like I said at the beginning, my name is Elizabeth de Brito. I'm based in London in the UK. Check out the website, thedaffodilperspective.com, for more information about my work and the show. The Daffodil Perspective goes out on Mixcloud, an online platform, every 2 weeks and is available to stream for free at your convenience. Lots of great music always, details on the website. And if you're looking for some more advice and inspiration on women in music and diverse composers in general, I do repertoire consultancy. Because one of the constant things I hear is that there's so much music out there. I've said that in this very talk. There's so much out there. It can be difficult to know where to start. So I've already done the heavy lifting, know the music and the resources. So do contact me for consultancy services. Details on the website as well. That's about it. Thank you to Pride Bands Alliance for inviting me and the excellent work you are doing increasing representation. Hope you all keep safe and well in this difficult time.